If you'd driven past the old county fairgrounds that Saturday night, you'd think you'd stumbled onto the set of some modern Western movie, where the dust never truly settles and the money's louder than the crickets. Spotlights beamed off new chrome trucks, and the parking lot was littered with hats. Stetsons and Resistol, some as white as wedding cakes, others as black as a preacher's Bible. Men and women in crisp jeans and pearl snap shirts mingled beneath the banner, Silver Ridge Premier Horse Auction. Waiters in bolo ties served up sparkling cider and sweet tea in mason jars, but everyone was buzzing on a different kind of thrill, anticipation and cash. This was not a place for dreamers or the faint of heart. Here, fortunes and reputations changed hands as easily as paddles and whiskey. To most of these folks, the night was about making a statement. Some wanted bloodlines, others wanted status, and a few just wanted to see who'd win the showy contest of egos. People had come from as far as Dallas and Cheyenne, but for most, the only thing wilder than the horses were the checkbooks. And that's why everyone noticed when the dusty old Chevy pickup rolled into the parking lot, wheezing like it was choking on its last breath. It looked out of place among the polished rigs, the kind of truck that didn't just haul hay but carried the smell of it. The door creaked open, and a man stepped out. A stranger, at least to these circles. His name, though few knew it yet, was Eli Shaw. Folks called him Eli. He was the type of man you might pass on the road without a second thought. A sunburned face shaded by an old ball cap. Gray in his beard, flannel shirt rolled up to elbows that knew real work, boots that had seen more miles than most of the horses here. He didn't bother with the crowd, didn't look around for friends or rivals, just paused, sized up the crowd, and started toward the barn. A hush of curiosity followed Eli as he walked. One of those ripples you see at fancy events when something doesn't quite fit the pattern. "Did he get lost on the way to the feed store?" whispered a young woman with rhinestones on her boots, not bothering to lower her voice. Her friends giggled, glancing at Eli like he was an old dog that had wandered onto their front porch. "Or maybe he's selling used saddles in the parking lot," joked a ranch hand from behind the catering table, earning himself a round of Snickers. Eli heard it all, but he didn't flinch. He moved like a man who'd made up his mind a long time ago and learned that the loudest room was rarely the most important. He made his way to the registration table, signed his name with a steady hand, and took a battered paddle with the number 36 on it. No one greeted him. No one offered a handshake. The social pecking order here was as strict as any schoolyard, and outsiders, especially ones who looked like they'd rather be fixing fences than bidding on horses, were at the bottom. Inside the arena, the atmosphere shifted from country fair to coliseum. The stands were packed with buyers and onlookers, all waiting for the spectacle everyone had whispered about for weeks. The sale of Iron Hart, the jet-black stallion with the wild eyes and the reputation to match. But Eli didn't head to the stands. He drifted along the edge of the barn, hands in his pockets, studying the horses with a quiet interest. There was something about him. Something unhurried, almost gentle, like he was listening for a song only he could hear. A little girl in braids tugged her father's sleeve. "Daddy, who's that?" Her father squinted at Eli, then shrugged. "Nobody from around here." And that was enough for most. Eli eventually stopped by the last pen, the one set apart from all the others. The sign read, "Iron Hart, not for novices." The stallion inside was more shadow than substance, pacing restlessly, his coat gleaming blue-black under the arena lights. He had scars along his ribs and a fire in his eyes that warned off anyone thinking of getting too close. A young trainer stood by the gate, sweat on his brow, making sure nobody got ideas. "He'll kill you if you try to touch him," the trainer muttered to a group of spectators, shaking his head for emphasis. "He's not here for folks who want a pretty pet." Eli didn't try to touch Iron Hart. He just stood there, quiet as a stone, his gaze steady. The stallion slowed, nostrils flaring. For a long heartbeat, the only thing moving was the dust swirling between them. Then, just for a moment, Iron Hart stilled completely, his wild eyes locking onto Eli's. Ears pricked forward. Something passed between them, invisible and electric. "Look at that," whispered a stable hand, eyes wide. Never seen him do that before. But if Eli noticed the attention, he didn't show it. He just nodded, as if in greeting, and moved back toward the auction floor. The big spenders were already crowding the front rows, talking shop and making bets. A local rancher pointed at Eli, laughing to his buddy. Bet he couldn't buy a bale of hay in there, let alone a horse. The auctioneer, a sharp-eyed woman named Lila Monroe, stepped up to the microphone. She smiled with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing she's about to make a lot of people very happy. Or very angry. "Ladies and gentlemen," she drawled, "it's time for tonight's headline event. The sale of Iron Hart, the legend you've all heard about, the stallion with the fire, to match his name. Who will be brave enough to claim him?" As the crowd pressed in, the mood shifted from festive to feverish. Eli watched from the side, unreadable. He could feel the eyes on him, the laughter curling under their breath, the questions swirling in the air. Who was he to walk into this room, dressed like a drifter, and act like he belonged? But for Eli Shaw, this was nothing new. He'd spent a lifetime walking into places where he wasn't welcome, listening to laughter that wasn't meant to be kind. He knew something these people didn't, that sometimes the quietest voice in the room was the one that mattered most. And as the bidding paddles were lifted and the lights glared down, Eli waited, not for their approval, but for the moment he'd come for. Tonight, he wasn't just another stranger at the auction. Tonight, he was a man on a mission. A man about to make the crowd laugh for all the wrong reasons. Because some stories don't start with a hero's welcome. They start with a stranger, a wild horse, and a moment nobody sees coming. The chatter in the auction hall hit a fever pitch as the staff readied Iron Hart for his big moment. Through a haze of dust and fluorescent lights, ranchers and business moguls craned their necks for a glimpse of the black stallion that had become the night's obsession. Even in a barn full of thoroughbreds, Iron Hart was unmistakable. Larger than life, unruly, and scarred by battles both seen and unseen. As handlers in canvas vests and battered hats prepared the pin, you could feel the tension humming like an electric wire. A steel gate separated Iron Hart from the crowd, but even from a distance, the sense of danger was real. The air buzzed with whispers of his legend, stories of trainers thrown, fences shattered, a horse with more will than most men. Some believed he'd been abused, others that he was simply born wild. Either way, he was the embodiment of raw, untamed energy. Beautiful, terrifying, and to most, utterly unmanageable. The trainers moved carefully, eyes wary, even the auction staff. Used to handling valuable but high-strung animals, kept a cautious distance. One tried tossing a halter over Iron Hart's neck, only to have the stallion whip his head, eyes rolling, ears laid flat against his skull. With a sharp snort, he slammed his shoulder into the gate, the clang echoing like a warning bell through the arena. People in the front row flinched. The horse pawed at the packed earth, muscles rippling beneath his coat, tail lashing the air in agitation. "See that?" muttered an old cowboy in the bleachers, his face leathered by sun and years of disappointment. "No man's gonna break that animal. He'll fight till he dies." A woman beside him, elegant in pearls and a designer vest, watched with a mix of fascination and fear. "He's magnificent," she breathed, "but he looks half crazy." In the center of this swirl of nerves and bravado stood Eli Shaw, silent and watchful at the rail. If he felt out of place, he didn't show it. Instead, he watched Iron Hart not with the calculating gaze of a buyer, but with the patience of someone listening for a secret language. To Eli, the chaos wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. Iron Hart met his gaze again, and the noise of the crowd seemed to fall away. For a moment, the wild stallion stood frozen, muscles tight, head high. The whites of his eyes showed, but he didn't bolt. He just stared at Eli, as if recognizing something no one else in the arena could see. The auctioneer, Lila Monroe, seized the moment, her voice rising above the murmurs. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, the legendary Iron Hart. They say you don't buy a horse like this. You try your luck and pray. She let the joke hang in the air, earning nervous laughter. The trainers had given up trying to settle the stallion. Now it was all spectacle. Iron Hart, prancing, tossing his head, occasionally slamming a hoof against the steel. His mane, thick and wild, flew with every violent shake. In the shadows, his scars seemed to catch the light, telling their own story of struggle and endurance. The first potential buyer, a middle-aged man with an expensive hat and an even pricier belt buckle, stepped forward. "Let's see him move," he called. At a handler's cautious signal, Iron Hart burst into a gallop along the rail, moving with a power that was almost reckless. Dirt kicked up, hitting the glass of the VIP box. Children gasped. Some of the crowd cheered, more in awe than support. "He's got spirit, all right," said a ranch owner, his tone more skeptical than admiring. "But what's the point if you can't ride him?" Another, older rancher shook his head. "There's no breaking a horse like that. Only breaking yourself." But as Iron Hart circled the pen, he kept glancing back toward Eli, as if pulled by a silent thread. Every time their eyes met, the stallion would hesitate, ears flicking forward, nostrils flaring as if trying to place an old memory. Eli, for his part, remained calm, barely moving except to slide his battered hat back a fraction. To the casual observer, it looked like nothing. But to those who paid close attention, it was clear something unusual was happening. The handlers, desperate to maintain control, tried again to corner Iron Hart with long poles, hoping to show him off to the potential buyers. The stallion exploded in protest, rearing up, front hooves slashing the air, teeth bared in fury. The younger handler lost his nerve and stumbled back, nearly dropping his pole. That's when it happened. In the chaos, Iron Hart spun, body pressed against the rails. Then, catching sight of Eli, he abruptly stopped. Just like that, his rampage ceased. The stallion stood quivering, sides heaving, but he didn't bolt or lash out. His wild, restless eyes locked onto Eli's once more. The connection was instant and unmistakable. A hush swept over the arena. Even the most jaded bidders sensed it, an electric moment that didn't belong to the showmanship of the auction or the ego of the buyers. It was as if, for the first time in years, Iron Hart wasn't alone in his fear. Eli took a slow step forward, meeting the stallion's gaze. "Easy, boy," he murmured, so softly only those closest could hear. "Ain't nobody here to hurt you." There was no bravado in his voice, no attempt at dominance, just understanding, calm and steady. One of the trainers shook his head, awe mixing with disbelief. "I'll be damned," he whispered. "He's never stood still for anyone." The crowd shifted, people leaning in, some pulling out their phones. "What's that man doing?" a tech investor whispered to his wife. "Is this some kind of trick?" But Eli wasn't performing. He kept his hands visible, his posture loose. Iron Hart's ears flicked forward, then back. He lowered his head, over just a little, a sign so subtle most would have missed it. It didn't last long. A sharp clatter as a chair fell, and the crowd broke the spell. Iron Hart jerked, eyes wild again, retreating to the far end of the pen, pacing and snorting. But the moment had happened, and everyone knew it. For the first time that night, the laughter at Eli's expense faded, replaced by something else, curiosity, in the uneasy sense that maybe, just maybe, this stranger and the wild stallion understood each other in a way nobody else could. As the auctioneer moved to start the bidding, she glanced at Eli, her expression shifting from practiced confidence to something like respect. "Let's begin," she said, voice ringing out over the arena. "But remember, tonight, you're not just bidding on a horse. You're taking on a legend." And for Eli Shaw and Iron Hart, the legend was only just beginning. The hush that followed Iron Hart's moment of calm didn't last. As the handlers coaxed the stallion back to the center of the pen, the crowd's restlessness boiled over into a flurry of whispered bets and not-so-subtle side comments. Cell phones flashed, capturing every unpredictable lunge or toss of Iron Hart's wild mane. The auctioneer, Lila Monroe, recognized the scent of anticipation in the air. This was what people paid for. The unpredictability of power and danger barely kept in check. On the arena's raised platform, she raised her gavel and flashed her brightest, most practiced smile. All right, folks, who's got the grit and the wallet for the legendary Iron Hart? Her words echoed, bouncing off the steel rafters. Let's start the bidding at $50,000. A hush, then a ripple. A few tentative hands went up, some genuine, some simply for the thrill of being part of the action. The number climbed steadily, 5,000 at a time. A wealthy cattleman from Oklahoma signaled at 70. A young influencer from Austin, seeking a new online persona, chimed in at 80. The bids grew bolder as the dollar signs piled up, the bravado in the room thick as molasses. But everyone knew the real drama hadn't started. Eyes flicked to the reserved seats near the front, where Bennett Claymore, the tech billionaire and founder of a global logistics empire, watched the action with an amused smile. Claymore was tall, tan, and impossible to ignore. Every inch of him screamed power, from his perfectly tailored suit to his easy, mocking laugh. This wasn't his first time making headlines at an auction, and everyone understood. If Claymore wanted Iron Hart, the rest were just playing for second place. At 100,000, Claymore finally raised his paddle with deliberate slowness, as if granting the crowd a favor. 200,000, he called out, his voice calm but carrying the weight of absolute confidence. A ripple of excitement ran through the audience. The auctioneer's eyes gleamed. Do I hear 210? 210. Anyone? Monroe coaxed. A few hopefuls tried 210, 220, but Claymore brushed them aside with a lazy 300,000. He never looked at the other bidders, only at Iron Hart. There was something predatory in his focus, the way a collector might eye a rare coin or a hunter his trophy. The room's energy shifted. People nudged each other, whispered, "It's over. He's got it. Nobody's going to outbid Claymore." Eli Shaw remained near the back, hands in his pockets, watching with that same patient steadiness. For most of the crowd, he'd faded into the background, a curiosity perhaps, but no more relevant than a ranch hand sweeping the aisles. Only a few remembered how Iron Hart had stilled at Eli's presence. Most assumed Eli didn't even have a seat at the table. The auctioneer pressed on, eyes darting for another challenger. 350. Do I have 350? But the bid slowed as Claymore ratcheted the price higher with practiced indifference. 500,000, he announced, drawing appreciative gasps. Monroe tried not to look too pleased. At this point, the entire hall was locked onto Claymore. Even Iron Hart seemed to sense the shift, his restlessness easing, as if recognizing the man most likely to take him from this place. In a far corner, Eli watched the stallion's subtle change, ears turning, muscles tensing, a deep unease settling over his posture. The bids paused. The auctioneer let the silence draw out, milking the suspense. 500,000, going once. Then, as if to remind everyone what was at stake, Iron Hart slammed his body against the steel rail. The sound echoed, a warning, a challenge, maybe even a plea. 600,000, Claymore declared, his voice almost bored now, as if he were buying another yacht. The audience buzzed. Some cheered, some shook their heads in disbelief, others simply stared, awed by the spectacle of raw money meeting raw power. In the back row, the young influencer slipped away, no longer interested in a prize this costly. The local ranchers looked at each other, rolling their eyes at the extravagance. The auctioneer, sensing the end, called, 600,000, going once. 600,000, going. A quiet voice cut through the din. 620,000. The room froze, heads turned, necks craned. For a moment, it seemed no one knew where the bid had come from. Then, eyes settled on Eli Shaw, paddle raised, his number barely visible, but his voice steady, unwavering. Silence, the kind that only comes when the world is trying to catch up to something it never expected. Claymore actually turned in his seat, eyebrows lifted in genuine surprise for the first time all night. Lila Monroe blinked, then recovered with professional poise. "We have 6:20, ladies and gentlemen. Do I hear 6:40? For a beat, nobody spoke. Eli's calm, weathered face stood in stark contrast to Claymore's polished arrogance. The billionaire studied Eli, this man in a threadbare shirt and boots with dust older than some of the guests, measuring perhaps whether this was some kind of joke. Claymore shrugged, almost amused, and called out, 700,000? But the bravado was tempered now. He looked directly at Eli, a challenge in his eyes. Eli didn't hesitate. 720. A stunned murmur, the crowd shifted. People began to murmur, some angry, some excited, some openly laughing now. "Is this guy for real?" someone whispered. "He's going to bankrupt himself." What's he playing at?" Monroe pressed on. 720? Do I have 740? Claymore's smile faded. For the first time, he looked uncertain, even insulted. But he shook his head. "I'm not paying a dime more for that beast. Let him have it." The way he spat the words, "let him have it," left no doubt that, for Claymore, it was no longer about money. It was about pride. The room buzzed with disbelief. Monroe confirmed, 720,000, going once, going twice, and Eli met Iron Hart's gaze from across the pen. The stallion's wildness hadn't faded, but now there was something else, a flicker of recognition, almost trust. Maybe he sensed that this night wasn't about ownership or breaking, but about something neither of them could name. Lila Monroe's gavel came down. "Sold to number 36, Eli Shaw." The room exploded. Some clapped, others jeered. The magnitude of the sum left people reeling. But Eli didn't react to the noise. He simply lowered his paddle, exhaled, and gave a subtle nod to the black stallion in the pen. All around, the whispers returned, harsher now, cutting through the post-auction chaos. "He'll never make it work," someone muttered. "That horse'll eat him alive. Where'd a guy like him get that kind of money? Maybe he's crazy." But for Eli Shaw, the laughter and the doubt were nothing new. Tonight, he'd done what no one expected. Tonight, he'd set something in motion that none of them could stop. And as the crowd swirled in gossip and disbelief, Eli walked quietly toward the payment desk, the echo of his unexpected bid still hanging in the air, as wild and undeniable as Iron Hart himself. As the echo of the auctioneer's gavel faded, the entire room seemed to shift. The noise of the crowd simmered, conversations turning from excitement to hushed disbelief. No one was quite sure what to do with themselves, least of all Bennett Claymore, whose jaw was set, smile gone. On any other night, the afterglow of victory would have belonged to the man with the biggest wallet. Tonight, all eyes turned to Eli Shaw, the outsider who had dared to outbid a billionaire. Eli made his way toward the front, the battered number 36 paddle still in his hand. People parted reluctantly, watching with open skepticism. He felt the eyes on his back, heard the muttered jokes. "Maybe he robbed a bank. That old truck won't make it past the county line. Bet he's writing a rubber check." The laughter wasn't even disguised anymore. The auction staff tried to keep things moving. Lila Monroe, still at the mic, forced a smile. "Let's take a brief intermission while our newest legend gets his paperwork sorted." She shot a quick glance at her team, already bracing for drama. Nobody, not even Monroe, was used to someone like Eli winning a prize this big. At the payment table, the clerk, an older woman named Doris with cat-eye glasses and an ironclad memory for faces, looked Eli up and down. She barely hid her skepticism. "We'll need payment in full," she said, her voice crisp. "No personal checks, no IOUs." Eli nodded, sliding a folded envelope from the inside pocket of his flannel shirt. Without a word, he handed it over. Doris opened it, half expecting a slip of paper and an apology. Instead, she pulled out a certified cashier's check, issued by the Silver Ridge Rescue Foundation, an organization most people in the room had never heard of. She peered at it, double-checked the amount, $720,000 spelled out in perfect block lettering. She checked again, squinting as if looking for a catch. "It's real," Eli said softly. No defensiveness, just quiet certainty. Doris pressed the check between her fingers, then looked up at him, something in her expression changing, surprise perhaps, or a grudging respect. She turned to Monroe, who had wandered over to keep an eye on things. "Payment's good," Doris announced, loud enough for the nearest dozen people to hear. A hush spread. You could feel the room's collective breath held in, then released all at once, first in confusion, then a wave of disbelief. For a moment it felt as if the world had tilted a few degrees off its axis. Claymore, standing nearby, stared hard at Eli, a flicker of anger behind his carefully neutral expression. The crowd's mood turned. Where once there had been laughter and mockery, now there was suspicion. Nobody just pays cash like that. Who is this guy? Is this some kind of trick? Whispers flew faster than the sound system could amplify the next auction lot. Eli, meanwhile, barely registered the swirl of gossip. He stood quietly, at the edge of the pen, as the handlers prepared to transfer ownership of Iron Hart. The stallion, still restless but no longer violent, circled the steel rails, eyes tracking Eli's every move. Claymore couldn't help himself. He strode over, his expensive boots clicking against the concrete. "You think you've won something?" he sneered, voice low so only Eli could hear. "He'll break you before you ever lead him out of this barn. You're just another fool who believes money means anything to that animal." Eli met Claymore's gaze, calm and unblinking. "Good thing I'm not trying to ride him," he replied, his tone even. "I'm trying to understand him," Claymore scoffed, but for a split second, something like uncertainty flashed in his eyes. He stepped back, the crowd parting as he moved, and joined his entourage, who were already talking about the next event, trying to forget the sting of public defeat. With the formalities handled, Monroe called for the handover. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Shaw will now claim his horse," she announced, her voice echoing through the PA system. "Let's give him a hand." A smattering of polite applause followed, but it was mostly drowned out by the constant undercurrent of murmured doubts. A hush fell as Eli approached Iron Hart's pen. No trainer dared open the gate, so Eli did it himself, unlatching the heavy steel lock with steady hands. Inside, Iron Hart snorted, muscles bunching, head held high. A storm trapped in flesh. For a tense moment, everyone expected an explosion. Some pulled out phones, hoping to capture the disaster. Instead, Eli stepped into the pen, unhurried, hands relaxed at his sides. No lead rope, no whip, no shouted commands, just presence. Quiet and deliberate. Iron Hart froze, ears flicking, tail slashing the dust. The two stood, facing each other. In the crowd, even the most cynical rancher felt the tension. The raw, electric possibility that something incredible or terrible was about to happen. Eli spoke, barely above a whisper. "I'm not here to fight you." He took another step forward. "I know what it's like to be caged up by people who only see your anger." For a long moment, nothing moved except the dust swirling around their feet. Then, slowly, impossibly, Iron Hart dropped his head. He took a cautious step toward Eli, nostrils quivering. The handlers looked at each other, jaws slack, disbelief plain on every face. Eli didn't reach out or try to touch the horse. He just waited, a statue of patience and quiet strength. Finally, Iron Hart stopped a yard away, breathing hard. Eli nodded, a silent acknowledgement, then turned and walked toward the gate, never once looking back to see if the stallion would follow. He didn't need to look. Iron Hart, after a brief hesitation, walked after him, matching his pace, not a trace of resistance in his stride. The silence in the barn was absolute, broken only by a gasp from someone in the crowd. "That horse has never followed anyone before," whispered a handler, his voice trembling. Eli led Iron Hart out of the pen and into the aisle. He didn't raise his arms in triumph or grin for the cameras. Instead, he paused, let the stallion settle beside him, and simply stood. Man and horse, both scarred and unbroken, side by side under the harsh fluorescent lights. The crowd, for once, had no jokes left. No one clapped, no one laughed. For a single, unforgettable moment, everyone understood. Something important had happened, something beyond money or pride. In the stunned aftermath, as handlers scrambled to reset for the next auction lot and Monroe fumbled her microphone, Eli quietly led Iron Hart out of the barn. The sound of their footsteps echoed, steady and sure, marking the end of an old legend and the uncertain, breathtaking start of a new one. Outside, the air had cooled, the night humming with the quiet chaos of trucks idling and trailers rattling. Overhead, floodlights cast long shadows across the gravel, stretching Eli's silhouette beside Iron Hart's like an old black and white photograph. A few people still lingered, watching the new owner and his impossible horse, with a mix of awe and skepticism. Eli ignored the attention. He was focused entirely on Iron Hart, speaking to him in soft, measured tones as he checked the stallion's legs and wiped sweat from the glossy black coat with a threadbare towel. The horse shuddered, muscles tight, but did not bolt or strike out. He'd just started to lead Iron Hart toward his trailer when he heard a familiar voice behind him, a voice as smooth and sharp as a knife. "Thought you'd just waltz off into the sunset, did you?" Bennett Claymore's boots crunched on the gravel, each step precise, controlled. His suit jacket was gone, sleeves rolled up, but the expensive watch glinted in the light. He moved with a predator's confidence, flanked by two members of his security team, both broad-shouldered and silent. Eli kept his back turned, methodically checking the stallion's halter. "Just trying to get home, same as you," he said, not rising to the bait. Claymore scoffed, stepping closer. "You really think you can handle that animal? You saw what happened in the ring. He's a killer, not a pet. He'll break you before he lets you lead him out of this lot." A small crowd was beginning to form again. Handlers, grooms, even a couple of young ranch hands who sensed that something more dramatic than the auction itself might unfold right here in the parking lot. They watched, wide-eyed, holding their breath. Eli straightened up, finally turning to face Claymore. The difference between the two men was stark. Claymore, with his smooth words and perfect hair, made Eli sunburned and steady, eyes full of storms, weathered and survived. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Eli said, "Good thing I'm not trying to ride him. I'm trying to understand him." The words hung in the air, simple and clear. Some of the crowd looked puzzled, but others, especially the old hands, the ones who'd fought their own losing battles with angry horses or haunted men, nodded, understanding more than Eli said out loud. Claymore's jaw tightened. "You're making a fool of yourself, Shaw, and of everyone who ever set foot in a ring with a horse like that. You think you're special? That some magic, poor man's patience is going to fix what's broken?" Eli's voice stayed calm, but his grip on Iron Hart's lead was gentle. "He's not broken. He's just been treated like something to be conquered, not understood, and same as a lot of folks I've known." Claymore laughed, but the sound was brittle. "You don't get it, do you? Men like us, men who win, know when to use force. You can't just talk the wild out of something. Sometimes you have to break it, or it'll break you." Eli shook his head, the ghost of a smile flickering on his lips. "And sometimes what needs fixing it isn't the horse. It's the man holding the rope." The words struck home harder than a punch. Claymore's face flushed. He stepped forward, voice low and dangerous. "If you care so much about that horse, maybe you should start by protecting him from your own stupidity. Because when he lashes out, and he will, nobody's going to blame me. They'll say I tried to warn you. They'll say you got what you deserved." At this, Eli's gaze grew steelier. "You don't scare me, Claymore, and you don't scare him." He nodded towards Iron Hart, who, for the first time, was standing quietly at his side, head up, eyes alert, but no longer wild with fear. "We're both still here. That ought to count for something." The crowd watched, silent, the tension like a wire ready to snap. For a long moment it seemed Claymore might push the confrontation further, but then he forced a tight smile, dismissing Eli with a wave of his hand. "I won't waste any more of my time. Let's see how long you last before you come begging me to take him off your hands. I'll give it a week." He turned and strode away, his entourage following, but not before one of his security men shot Eli a look that promised trouble if things ever turned ugly. The crowd slowly dispersed, some muttering, some shaking their heads, but a few, especially the ones who had seen something extraordinary in the arena, lingered nearby, watching as Eli resumed tending to Iron Hart. He whispered reassurances to the stallion, who flicked an ear back, but didn't shy away. The connection between them, forged in those tense minutes in the ring, felt fragile but real. And as he worked, Eli overheard snatches of conversation. "Never seen Claymore so mad. That Shaw guy's got guts. I'll give him that. He'll be lucky to last the night with that demon horse." The words slid past Eli like water off oilskin. He'd been doubted before, mocked, even threatened. None of it mattered now. He finished checking Iron Hart over, moving slow and deliberate. The stallion watched every motion, still tense but no longer trying to bolt. Eli leaned in and spoke so only the horse could hear. "You've had men come at you with ropes and whips and shouts. I'm not them. I'm here for as long as it takes." The horse's ears flicked forward, nostrils flaring. For a heartbeat, Eli felt a flicker of hope. This was what he believed in. The long, stubborn work of trust, of letting wounds heal on their own time. Not everything wild needed taming. Some things, maybe the best things, just needed room to breathe. He led Iron Hart slowly to his battered old trailer. The crowd watched, expecting a fight or a scene, but the stallion walked with him, not docile, but not resisting either. It wasn't obedience, it was something older and more honest. As Eli latched the trailer door, he glanced back at the auction barn and the fading neon sign. He knew Claymore would be back. He knew the doubt and the danger weren't finished. But for now, under the harsh lights and the vast, quiet sky, Eli Shaw felt the first fragile threads of victory, not over the horse or over Claymore, but over the long shadow of cynicism that had haunted him for years. Tonight, the real work was only just beginning. By the time Eli finally pulled his pickup and battered trailer through the creaking gates of his ranch, the clock on the dash was pushing past midnight. The road home had been silent. No headlights trailing him, no more voices echoing Claymore's taunts. Just the low hum of tires on gravel and the heavy, living presence of Iron Hart behind him. Every so often, the trailer would rock with a restless stomp or a snort, and Eli would murmur quiet reassurances, more for the horse than himself. The Silver Ridge Rescue Ranch was a far cry from the polished paddocks and glossy barns of the auction world. The driveway wound past rough pasture and scattered oaks, fencing patched with whatever materials Eli could salvage. Old rails, barbed wire, even the frame of a bed once, bent and reimagined as a gate. But under the moonlight, the place held a kind of gentle dignity. It was where broken things found space to breathe. As Eli stepped out into the cool night, the familiar chorus of frogs and distant coyotes greeted him. He opened the trailer, letting the ramp down slow, careful not to spook his new companion. For a moment, Iron Hart stood in shadow, nostrils flaring, eyes wide and white-rimmed, his muscles tensed, ready for flight or fight. Eli didn't force him. He stood to the side, out of reach, hands empty. "Your move, fella," he said softly. A breeze lifted, stirring Iron Hart's mane. The stallion hesitated, then stepped down onto the dirt, one trembling hoof, then another, until he stood, blinking in the darkness, framed by the trailer's open door and the endless Texas sky. Eli waited. He knew better than to rush. Horses read intentions better than most men, and this one had spent his life learning not to trust. For a long minute, they just stood together in the hush of midnight. The only sound Iron Hart's uneven breathing. When the horse finally lowered his head and exhaled, Eli felt a knot loosen in his chest. "Attaboy," he murmured. "Not so bad out here, is it?" Leading Iron Hart wasn't like leading any other animal Eli had rescued. The stallion bristled at every new smell, every rustle in the grass, every shifting shadow. But he followed Eli, slow, uncertain, but willing, across the yard to a sturdy round pen. Eli let him loose inside, giving him space to run, to buck, to remind himself that the world hadn't shrunk to steel rails in strangers' hands. For a while, Eli simply sat outside the pen, back against the fence, watching Iron Hart move. The stallion circled the perimeters, snorting, testing the limits of his new enclosure. At times he'd rear or lash his tail, but gradually the edge of panic dulled into cautious curiosity. He watched Eli too, never taking his eyes off the man who'd paid a fortune and more for a second chance. When dawn broke, pink and gentle over the pasture, Eli moved to the barn for a mug of coffee and a biscuit, leaving Iron Hart to settle. The ranch woke up slowly, chickens scratching, a couple of rescued goats bleeding from their paddock, and at the far end of the property, two ranch hands, Maria and Big Jim, arrived for their shift, faces creased with concern when they saw the new arrival. Maria leaned on the fence. "Is that the beast from the auction?" Her accent curled softly through her words. Eli nodded, sipping his coffee. "He's a handful, but I think he'll do all right." Big Jim, broad as a barn door and gentle as a lamb, just shook his head. "That horse looks at you like he's trying to remember a dream." Eli chuckled, rubbing his chin. "Maybe he is." They watched in silence as Iron Hart slowed, nostrils flaring, sniffing the earth, the fence, the morning breeze. He was still wild, still haunted, but there was a flicker of something else. A question, maybe. Or the first faint spark of hope. The day's first true test came at the old wooden bridge that spanned a shallow, rocky stream behind the barn. The bridge was nothing fancy, just planks and nails, worn smooth by years of hoofbeats and sun. Eli needed to move Iron Hart across to reach the main pasture, but he knew better than to rush the moment. He led the stallion to the bridge, rope loose in his hands. The instant Iron Hart saw the strange, narrow crossing, he balked, digging in his heels and snorting, body rigid with fear. The boards creaked in the wind, and every instinct told him to run. Eli didn't pull or shout. Instead, he walked a few paces ahead, then stopped. He knelt down in the grass at the edge of the bridge, arms resting on his knees, and waited. He said nothing, did nothing, just breathed. Present and patient. Minutes passed, 10, then 20. Maria peeked around the barn, eyebrows raised. "You need a hand, boss?" Eli shook his head. "Nope, he's got to choose it." Iron Hart paced, tossing his head, sweat darkening his flanks. More than once, he pawed the ground, half rearing in frustration. But Eli stayed put, unmoving as a fence post. He'd waited out wilder things, storms, sorrow, the slow healing of wounds invisible to most. After 32 minutes, Maria timed it herself, Iron Hart finally lowered his head, blowing out a long, trembling sigh. He sniffed the boards, hesitated, then set one hoof on the bridge. The wood groaned but held. Slowly, carefully, the stallion stepped across, every muscle tight, but he didn't bolt. When he reached the other side, Eli stood up, brushing the dirt from his jeans. He didn't cheer or gloat, he just offered a quiet, "Good job," then led Iron Hart into the sunlight. From the porch, Big Jim let out a low whistle. "Never seen anything like it," he said. Maria wiped her eyes, trying not to let anyone see. Eli gave Iron Hart a gentle pat, and for the first time since the auction, allowed himself a small smile. "There's more to him than fear," he said, almost to himself. "He just needs a reason to believe." The ranch settled into its routine, but something had shifted. Where there had been skepticism, now there was cautious hope. Eli knew the hard work was far from over. There would be setbacks, maybe even danger, but for now, he and Iron Hart had found common ground, not through force, but through patience, trust, and the quiet promise of a new beginning. The sun climbed higher, burning away the last of the night's coolness, as Eli worked alongside Maria and Big Jim to settle Iron Hart into his new life at Silver Ridge Rescue Ranch. The stallion watched every move with wary eyes, still skittish, but no longer wild with panic. His coat glistened in the Texas sun, black as oil and marked by scars that told 1,000 stories. Around him, the rhythms of ranch life unfolded, dogs barking, the clatter of feed buckets, goats butting heads over breakfast. Yet, for everyone present, there was no doubt. Iron Hart was now the center of this little universe. Maria watched from the rail, arms folded tight. "He's a beauty," she murmured, voice equal parts awe and concern. "But that's a dangerous kind of beauty." Eli nodded, tossing a handful of sweet feed into a rubber bin inside the round pen. "Sometimes the things worth saving come with teeth." He kept his tone light, but he didn't take his eyes off Iron Hart. The morning was spent in slow, patient rituals. Eli cleaned the stallion's wounds and brushed out the snarls in his mane, never forcing contact, but always present, always gentle. Every now and then Iron Hart would tense, trembling with old memories, but each time he calmed a little sooner. Maria noticed, shooting Eli a sideways glance. "You ever get tired of waiting?" she asked. Eli shook his head, a small, knowing smile on his face. "Patience is all I've ever had, Maria." The real challenge, though, came with the day's first big task, crossing the small wooden bridge that led out to the main pasture. Horses that had never been hurt by people sometimes balked at its wobble and creak. But for a horse like Iron Hart, one who'd been taught by pain to distrust everything, it might as well have been a chasm. Eli led Iron Hart to the edge of the bridge, the stallion's ears pricked forward, nostrils wide, hooves rooted to the earth. He snorted, eyes rolling, and threw his weight backward. The rope in Eli's hands went taut, but he didn't tug. Instead, he dropped the rope entirely, letting it rest slack on the ground. "Go on," he said softly, stepping away and sitting cross-legged in the grass, a few yards from the bridge's mouth. Maria, who'd come to watch, frowned in confusion. "You're just going to sit there?" "Trust goes both ways," Eli replied, voice even. Iron Hart paced, muscles rippling under his battered hide. For the first 10 minutes, nothing changed. Birds flitted through the oaks, a breeze rattled the fence, and the stallion alternated between snorting at the bridge and casting anxious glances at Eli. More than once, Maria was tempted to step in, offer a carrot maybe, or try to lead him herself. But Eli's calm confidence kept her rooted to the spot. Big Jim ambled over, wiping sweat from his brow. "He gonna cross? Or is this another one of your Zen experiments, boss?" Eli just grinned. Wait and see." As the minutes dragged on, the ranch hands who'd finished their chores gathered at a respectful distance. Even some of the horses in neighboring paddocks watched with pricked ears, sensing the tension in the air. Finally, after half an hour that felt like a lifetime, Iron Hart's posture shifted. The whites of his eyes faded as he dropped his head to sniff the boards. He stretched one hoof forward, testing the first plank. It groaned beneath his weight, but he didn't panic. Inch by inch, the stallion moved, every muscle coiled with uncertainty. And then Maria held her breath. Jim muttered a prayer under his breath. Eli didn't move. Didn't even blink. With a final snort, Iron Hart stepped fully onto the bridge. He paused, trembling, then pushed forward. The entire structure creaked, but he kept going, never breaking into a run, never pulling away. When his hooves touched grass on the other side, Maria let out a whoop. Jim started clapping, and even the dogs barked in approval. Eli stood up slowly, brushing off his jeans. He walked over, collected the rope, and patted Iron Hart's shoulder. "Told you," he said quietly, pride and relief warring on his face. Maria was the first to approach, her skepticism gone. I don't even know what that was. Magic, maybe." Eli chuckled, scratching at his beard. "No magic, just trust." You give a horse enough space to decide, and sometimes he surprises you. Jim shook his head, awe plain in his eyes. Uh, Never seen a horse like that listen to anybody. Word of Iron Hart's crossing spread through the ranch like wildfire. A few hands filmed the moment on their phones, sending it to friends or posting it online. Within hours, the video had started to circulate among the local horse community. Then, thanks to one well-timed tag, it hit social media on a broader scale. By midday, Eli's phone was buzzing nonstop. Messages poured in from reporters, bloggers, horse trainers, and even a few reality TV producers. Everyone wanted to know the secret of the man who tamed the untamable without touching a rein. Eli ignored most of them. He wasn't interested in selling stories or signing contracts. All he cared about was giving Iron Hart a chance to heal on his own terms. But for the people at Silver Ridge, the change was real and undeniable. Where skepticism had ruled, now there was hope. Maria offered to help with Iron Hart's care, promising to be patient and gentle. And Big Jim, usually stoic, brought apples and carrots, leaving them just out of reach so the stallion would have to decide whether to approach. The other horses seemed to sense the shift, too, grazing nearby, but giving Iron Hart respectful space. For Eli, the victory was bittersweet. He knew the hardest work was still ahead. Iron Hart was far from fixed. There would be setbacks, fears triggered by a sudden sound, anger at the sight of a rope, old scars that might never fully fade. But for the first time, Eli let himself believe that the stallion could become more than a cautionary tale. He could become a symbol of what was possible when you met fear with patience instead of force. That night, as the last light faded from the sky, Eli sat on the porch, listening to the soft sounds of the ranch settling in for sleep. Iron Hart grazed quietly in the paddock, head down, body relaxed. Maria and Jim sat with Eli, mugs of coffee warming their hands, the silence between them comfortable. "You think he's going to be all right?" Maria asked, voice hopeful. Eli smiled, gaze never leaving the black stallion in the dark. "He already is. He just needs us to stay out of his way and keep believing." As the stars wheeled overhead, it felt, just for a moment, like the whole world had slowed down, giving both man and horse the space to heal, and maybe, finally, to belong. If Eli had known what would happen after Iron Hart's first crossing of the bridge, he might have thought twice about letting Maria film the moment on her phone. But in the age of instant sharing, word spread faster than wildfire in a dry pasture. By the time Eli finished his chores the next morning, the clip had already gained traction on social media. Maria's short video, captioned, "A horse who wouldn't let anyone close until now," had racked up thousands of views and hundreds of comments. It showed Eli seated in the grass, unmoving, while Iron Hart, wary and trembling, finally chose to trust, taking those first tentative steps across the old wooden planks. The internet loved it. Horse people saw a miracle. Skeptics called it a trick. City folk, charmed by the raw, dusty magic of it all, shared it for reasons even they couldn't explain. The Silver Ridge Ranch's inbox overflowed. Some wrote to say how much the story meant to them. Tales of trauma, recovery, and second chances. Others asked about the method or tried to hire Eli as a consultant for their own unruly horses. One journalist from a big equestrian magazine left 3 voicemails and an email with the subject line, "Call me ASAP." It didn't stop there. A few hours after Maria's post, the video was picked up by an animal rescue account with 500,000 followers. That's when things truly went wild. Local news crews called, asking if they could come film a segment. A regional morning show host left a message asking for a live demonstration. A reality TV scout, slick and persistent, emailed a contract for a docu-series about the cowboy with the magic touch. Big Jim was the first to spot the surge. He found Eli in the barn, fixing a busted stall door, and waved his phone excitedly. Boss, you're famous. There's folks saying you're the next horse whisperer. Eli didn't look up from his work. Don't believe everything you read, Jim. Maria grinned, joining them. You should see the comments, Eli. People are saying you're some kind of miracle worker. Eli just shook his head, wiping sweat from his brow. I'm nobody's miracle. Just as stubborn. That afternoon, as the sun baked the ranch in late spring heat, a white SUV with a local TV station's logo rolled up the drive. A pair of eager reporters, one young, one seasoned, climbed out, clutching a camera and notepad. We're looking for Mr. Shaw, the younger one called. Eli came out, hat low over his brow. That's me. Can I help you? We're here about the horse. Iron Hart. The older reporter smiled, tone friendly but insistent. We'd love a quick interview, maybe a walk and talk with the animal. Eli hesitated, glancing at Maria and Jim. They watched, curious, but left the decision to him. He nodded slowly. I'll talk. But I won't put the horse on display for anybody. The interview was brief. The reporters asked about his unique technique, the stallion's past, and what it felt like to be called a horse whisperer. Eli answered as best he could, never raising his voice, never taking credit. He's not tamed. He's learning to trust again, is all. And that takes time, not tricks. The footage aired on the evening news, and before nightfall, a half-dozen more requests came in. Each promised more exposure, more attention, sometimes more money than Eli saw in a year. You could be a star, the reality show producer said in a message. America loves a redemption story. But Eli, true to his word, refused them all. He ignored the emails, let the phone ring, and deleted messages without reply. He wouldn't sell Iron Hart's story, not for a quick payday, not for 5 minutes of fame. The ranch hands watched as more and more attention came. But Eli never changed. He got up before dawn, worked until after dark, and gave every rescued horse, old or young, broken or half wild, the same patient respect. Of course, not everyone understood. Maria sometimes pleaded, just think of what you could do with the money, Eli. You could fix up the ranch, take in more animals, give them a real shot. But Eli shook his head. It's not about the ranch. It's about him. Iron Hart didn't ask to be famous. He just wanted a place to breathe. The other horses at Silver Ridge seemed to notice the shift too. Where once Iron Hart's presence had set off a storm of nerves and posturing, now a quiet order settled. The rescued mares grazed nearby, less anxious than before. The goats, bold and noisy, wandered closer without panic. Even the barn cat, a wiry orange stray named Whiskey, curled up just outside Iron Hart's pen, daring fate and the stallion's temper. Iron Hart watched it all with deep, curious eyes, no longer the haunted, lashing creature of his arrival. Some evenings, Maria or Jim would catch Eli watching the sunset, Iron Hart at his subrawade. They never heard the man say much, sometimes just a quiet, you did good today, or a chuckle when the stallion tried to nuzzle his pocket for a treat. The internet's fascination didn't fade overnight. There were new videos, Iron Hart sniffing at a child's outstretched hand, standing still while Eli cleaned his hooves, even dozing in the warm sun, head low and calm. Each post brought a fresh wave of comments, invitations, and offers, but Eli never let it go to his head. One morning, a package arrived at the ranch. Inside was a painting mailed from a stranger 3 states away, showing Iron Hart crossing the bridge. Eli seated in the grass. On the back, a note read, "Thank you for reminding us that not everything wild needs fixing. Some things just need patience." Eli hung it in the barn, where the horses could see it every day. And still, life went on. The fields needed mowing, fences needed mending, the animals needed feeding and care. Iron Hart, now a legend beyond the boundaries of Silver Ridge, was simply another soul learning how to live in peace. For Eli, that was the only reward worth chasing. Late one evening, after a long day of chores and more ignored phone calls, Eli lingered by Iron Hart's paddock, watching the stallion graze in the last light. The world might have been watching, but here, on this quiet patch of earth, It was just a man, a horse, and the slow, stubborn work of trust. He smiled, tipping his hat back, and let himself hope that maybe, just maybe, this was enough. Not even a week after the video went viral, the Silver Ridge Rescue Ranch found itself at the center of a different kind of storm. It started with a phone call Maria took on the old landline. A voice so confident, so smooth, she knew who it was before he even gave his name. "He's back," she muttered, finding Eli mucking out a stall. "Claymore, he wants to come see you. Says it's about business." Eli set down his pitchfork, wiped his hands on a rag, and nodded. "Let him come. Might as well hear what he's got to say." That afternoon, a gleaming black SUV rolled down the dusty drive. Its arrival as much an announcement as a vehicle. The sun flashed off its chrome grille, blinding as a camera flash. Out stepped Bennett Claymore, flanked by two men in suits and sunglasses. Claymore's suit was a little less crisp than before, his smile a little tighter, but he still radiated power, like a king come to reclaim his lost crown. Eli waited by the barn, arms folded, Iron Hart grazing calmly in the paddock behind him. Rhea and Big Jim lingered nearby, trying to look busy but unable to keep their eyes off the unfolding scene. Claymore strode up, dust swirling around his polished shoes. He didn't waste time on small talk. Let's not pretend we're friends, Shaw," he said, voice just loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm here to make you an offer, one you'd be a fool to refuse." Eli didn't blink. "You spent enough last time trying to buy him, Claymore. What's different now?" Claymore's smile was thin. "I underestimated you and the horse, but I didn't see the value, real value, in what you were doing. Yeah, but I do now. This video, he gestured toward Iron Hart. It's got everyone talking. You could turn this place into a showpiece, a brand. I'm prepared to pay triple what you did for him. That's over $2 million. And I'll fund your rescue ranch, too. Buy new equipment, new facilities, anything you want. On one condition, the ranch operates under the Claymore name. My foundation, my branding, my way." The air seemed to tighten, the old wooden boards of the barn groaning in the heat. Big Jim's jaw clenched. Maria looked at Eli, eyes wide. Everyone waited. Eli took a long, slow breath, eyes never leaving Claymore's face. "That's a generous offer," he said, his tone unreadable. "But you had the money before. What you didn't have was the patience." Claymore's cheeks reddened, but he pressed on. "Patience doesn't pay the bills, Shaw. You can't save every animal on hope and stubbornness. The world respects winners, not martyrs." Eli's mouth twisted into a small, sad smile. "You're not wrong. But the thing is that you don't buy respect. You earn it. Iron Hart didn't come here to be a logo or a sideshow. He came for a second chance, same as the rest of us." Claymore glanced at Iron Hart, who had wandered close, ears flicking, eyes calm and clear in the warm sunlight. The stallion watched the two men, silent and imposing. For a moment, Claymore's resolve flickered. He looked back at Eli. "You could do so much good with my money." Eli shook his head, gentle but firm. "Money can build barns, but it can't buy trust. And it sure can't heal what's been broken. I'd rather struggle than sell out what matters." Claymore exhaled hard, frustration breaking through his polished veneer. "You're making a mistake. This isn't about pride, Shaw. It's about the future. Your way is slow, small. Mine is global. Think bigger." "I am thinking bigger," Eli replied quietly. "I'm thinking about every animal that's been hurt by someone who thought they knew better. I'm thinking about the kids who come out here, needing to see that being different isn't something to be fixed. I'm thinking about Iron Hart, who doesn't need another man's ambition. He just needs time." Claymore's expression hardened. "If you change your mind, my offer stands. But the world won't wait forever." He turned, signaling to his men, and stalked back toward the SUV, his footsteps heavy with wounded pride. As the SUV disappeared in a cloud of dust, Maria let out a long, shaky breath. You just turned down more money than I've seen in my life, Eli. Eli shrugged, looking out across the pasture where Iron Hart now grazed, peaceful in the late afternoon sun. Some things you don't put a price on, Maria? Big Jim grinned, admiration plain on his face. Guess you proved him wrong twice now. Eli chuckled. He'll get over it. The ranch slowly returned to its usual rhythm, the tension melting away. Eli walked out to Iron Hart, who met him halfway, ears forward, posture relaxed. Eli rested a hand on the stallion's neck and stood quietly, soaking in the fading light. Later that night, Eli sat on the porch, listening to the hush of crickets and the distant cry of a coyote. He thought of all the offers, all the quick fixes, and all the shortcuts he'd turned down in his life. He knew the world would never understand why he chose the harder road. But as Iron Hart nickered softly from his paddock, Eli smiled. Respect couldn't be bought. It was earned, in quiet moments, in patient hours, in every small act of faith, and for the first time in a long while, Eli felt at peace with his choices. Summer deepened over Silver Ridge Rescue Ranch. The days stretched long and golden, shadows falling gently across the paddocks as the cicadas buzzed and the fields ripened in the sun. Life settled into a new rhythm, a rhythm shaped not by showmanship or spectacle, but by trust, patience, and 1,000 small, hard-won victories. Iron Hart was still the first thing people asked about when they visited the ranch. Sometimes strangers from faraway towns showed up at the gate, shy and hopeful, wanting just a glimpse of the black stallion who'd tamed the internet's heart. Most days, though, the only witnesses to Iron Hart's progress were Eli, Maria, Big Jim, and the quiet parade of rescue animals who found shelter at Silver Ridge. Under Eli's steady hand, Iron Hart changed in ways no one had dared imagine. He was still proud, still quick to spook at a sudden noise, or flare his nostrils at a stranger, but the wild, haunted look had faded from his eyes. Now he carried his head high, his coat gleaming in the sunlight, each muscle rippling with health. He let Maria brush his mane without flinching, and Big Jim hand-fed him carrots, grinning when the stallion nuzzled his palm. Sometimes, when Eli whistled low, Iron Hart would trot over, the two of them walking together like old friends along the fence line. Neither one in a hurry, both content with the world exactly as it was. But the most remarkable moment came on a quiet Sunday when the ranch hosted a group of children from a local foster program. Some of them had never seen a horse up close. Others were shy, keeping to the corners, hands stuffed in pockets, wary of the unfamiliar. Eli greeted them with his usual easy patience, letting the kids wander at their own pace, never forcing an interaction. Near the end of the visit, one small boy, thin, solemn-eyed, hardly older than 8, stood apart from the group, watching Iron Hart from across the paddock. Eli noticed and walked over, kneeling beside him. "He's big," the boy whispered. "He is," Eli agreed, his voice gentle. "But he won't hurt you. Not if you move slow and stay calm." The boy looked uncertain, so Eli held out his hand. "Come on, I'll go with you." Together, they crossed the dusty yard to where Iron Hart stood at the fence, tail flicking lazily in the sun. Eli let the boy take the lead, stepping back just enough to give him confidence. The child reached out, fingers trembling. Iron Hart watched him, still as a statue, then lowered his great black head until his muzzle was within reach. The boy's hand brushed the stallion's nose. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Iron Hart nickered softly and leaned in, letting the child's hand rest against his warm skin. A hush fell over the ranch. Even the other children stopped to watch. Eli smiled, blinking away tears as the boy's face lit up with a shy, amazed grin. From the porch, Maria and Big Jim exchanged glances. "Never thought I'd see the day," Maria whispered. "That horse," Big Jim said, shaking his head with wonder. "He's a legend now." Eli knew it was more than that. Iron Hart had become something bigger than any viral video or auction spectacle, a living testament to the idea that not everything wild needs taming, and not every wound can be healed with force. That night, as the sun bled red and orange behind the hills, Eli sat on the porch, Iron Hart grazing quietly in the gathering dusk. The ranch was peaceful, the chaos and laughter of the day giving way to the hum of crickets and the soft whicker of horses bedding down for the night. Eli's mind drifted back over the months, the auction, the disbelief, Claymore's offers, the viral storm. He thought of the boy's hand on Iron Hart's nose, the slow, patient work that had brought them all to this moment. He knew there would be more struggles, more scars, but he also knew that what they had built here was real, a legacy not of money or power, but of quiet strength and earned trust. Sometimes Maria would ask him, "Aren't you tempted, even a little, to take one of those offers? To go big, be famous, build something huge?" Eli always smiled. "I don't need fame, Maria. All I ever wanted was a place where a horse like him could just be." On that last evening, as darkness settled and the first stars appeared, Eli felt a rare and perfect peace. He watched Iron Hart wander to the fence, watched as another group of children, bolder now, came to offer treats and gentle touches. The stallion welcomed them, unhurried and calm, living proof that respect and kindness could build bridges where force never could. As Eli rose to head inside, he glanced back one last time, or in the fading light, the ranch glowed with possibility. A place where broken things found hope, where the loudest storms could be calmed by the quietest voice. Voiceover? He wasn't broken. He was waiting for someone who didn't try to fix him, just someone who stayed. Closing morale. Loud. Message. Not everything wild needs taming, just space and trust. You can't buy respect. You have to earn it, often by listening. And sometimes it takes the quietest voice to calm the loudest storm. If you believe patience is more powerful than force, hit that like button. If you know someone who proved the world wrong just by showing up, share this story with them. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories where kindness leads the way.